Let me introduce Kyle Loven to you. He's the National Director for Computer Forensic Services. Kyle is also a 22-and-a-half-year veteran of the FBI and served as the Chief Division Counsel for the Minneapolis Division. Kyle received his Juris Doctor from Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, and he's also a certified compliance and ethics professional. Please welcome Kyle.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you. Everyone can hear me all right? Okay. Navigating the information age, that's what we're going to speak about today. This is not intended to turn all of you into forensic specialists, nor is it intended to have, when you leave today, have you discharge and throw away all your electronic devices. I gave a presentation a couple weeks down in Austin, Texas, and after I finished, a woman came up to me. She goes, you have persuaded me to do this. I'm going to throw away every electronic device I have. I said, maybe I've overshot the mark, because this is only to make people aware of the perils that are out there with an online presence. So that's really what is intended today. And if you're like me, I learn best with stories of real life events, and my presentation is going to be littered with those. So if you have questions about how this could have happened or why this happened, I'll answer those as best I can. But just so you're aware, most of my illustrations are real life illustrations of things that have not gone well for certain entities. This is a roadmap slide. This is what we're going to be covering today: the problems, the solutions. I'm going to talk about how digital evidence is making an impact. A lot of people, they think of digital evidence, sometimes their eyes glaze over, especially those of us in the legal profession. But this is a real life case I want to talk to you about, which occurred in Minneapolis, where, but for digital evidence, an innocent person would have gone to prison. And then we'll finish it up today with a case study on the dark web. Are people familiar with the dark web by and large? No? Okay. We'll see what kind of time we have left, but we're going to go through this instance where there was a murder, an attempted murder for hire in Minneapolis using the dark web. We'll go through the particulars of that, and if we do have time at the end, we'll take a short dark web tour. I don't know if I'm going to be able to squeeze that in, given that we have an hour here today, but we'll see what we can do. One takeaway from today, and I hear this from law firms in we're really not a high-profile target, so we really don't need to worry about our cybersecurity. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you have personally identifiable information or sensitive information, or your firm does, you are going to be a target of hackers. They want this information for a number of reasons. My plea is don't make it easy for them. Don't make it easy for yourself to be exposed and to be vulnerable in this sense. This is a picture of, we sent a colleague of ours to one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in New York City, in all of North America. It was in New York City. He walks up to register. He sees an unattended laptop computer. So he takes a picture of it. And as you can see, there's the password and the username sitting right there at one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in North America. That's making it too easy, folks. That's making it way too easy. We want to be a little bit better about our security protocols. We also don't want to do these types of things. We don't want to tweet out our passwords, right? I hear chuckles, I hear snickers. These events actually occurred. This was withdrawn, but not before it wasn't retweeted 8 times and actually liked 6 times. Hackers. Again, especially with respect to law firms, I've heard this many times. We're not really high-profile targets. There's nothing we really have that's of interest to people. This is a case out of New York, mergers and acquisitions law firm, dealing in buying and selling different organizations. Clearly, they've got, I better stay over here closer to the mic. Clearly, they have information that would be of benefit to people wanting to make a quick buck. And what you had here is you had 3 gentlemen from China who knew, they supposed, that this law firm who dealt in mergers and acquisitions had lax security protocols. And sure enough, they exploited them. What they did is they hacked into the records, into the information systems of the firm, purchased stock in companies that were in the process of being purchased. And they made $4 million doing this before they were finally caught. All right, $4 million worth of illicit stock purchases or gains from illicit stock purchases before they were detected. Now they were detected, they were arrested, they were charged, and they were convicted. But it was a wake-up call. In New York, this garnered a lot of attention. The former U.S. Attorney, Pre-Parara, he had this whole long press conference. And I'm a former FBI agent. I've been through U.S. attorneys. Make any U.S. attorneys in here? Okay, good. I've sat through press conferences. They go on and on and on. A lot of times it's very superfluous information. There was one quote in Mr. Barara's in his press conference that really stuck with me. You are and will be targets of cyber hacking because you have information valuable to would-be criminals. That's it in a nutshell. That press conference that he had, it was quite extensive. It could have been boiled down to that quote. So at the end of the day, when people talk about, especially law firms, we're not high-profile targets, why would anyone be interested in gathering any of our information? If you have sensitive information, hackers and bad actors can make use of it. There's no question about it. Alexandria, Virginia, a law firm puts in a new voicemail system. And if you're familiar with voicemail systems, they come with, I'll call them the factory passwords. They come with a password. Of course, once you personalize them, you're supposed to go in, change those passwords to something unique that only you can remember. Well, this law firm, being a small law firm, figured, why would I waste the time to go in and change passwords? And they didn't. They left them at the set passwords. And so a hacker called in to the voicemail system, put in the factory password, and voila, had access to the phone system. Ended up charging $65,000 worth of phone calls to, I think they were calling Algeria, Serbia, all around the globe. And this law firm was stuck with the bill. In examining this story, it was discovered that this had happened on 2 occasions. So when the firm found out about it the first time, you'd think that it would have been a mandatory thing to change your passwords, right? For the phone system? No, they didn't. And so, of course, the bad guy called in again. Hey, this is easy. All my phone calls are paid through this firm. I'm going to do it again, and that's what happened. So, again, when it comes to security protocols, you've got to change those default passwords. I always tell people you make passwords very easy for you to remember, lengthier passwords. I know it's not convenient, but they should be lengthier passwords, which makes them very difficult to guess. What do you think the favorite password is out there by far? Password. Absolutely. Password is the most popular password. And that's great because it's very convenient, right? You don't want to remember all these different passwords. The problem with that is that bad actors know that password is the most valuable password. And when it comes to wanting to break into someone's system, typically that's going to be the first thing they try. So you have to be wary that people are probably going to get you, folks. I'm not trying to make people paranoid per se, but there are bad actors who are out trying to gather this information any way they can. Okay? Equifax breach. We're all familiar with Equifax breach. Equifax, the problem with this breach, and we'll talk about other breaches, but to me, this was the mother lode of all breaches. Because, and if people remember the Target Corporation breach from a few years back, okay. Target, they were breached. All of us who shopped at Target, we used credit cards. We had to go through the inconvenience of getting new credit cards, cutting up the old ones, waiting for the new credit card to come. We all remember that. But the damage was limited to credit cards. Or if you used debit card, it could have been more serious. But by and large, it was the credit card situation. With the Equifax breach, what's the expiration date on all this personally identifying information? There's 143 million people who are compromised. I would say all of us in this room were probably compromised through this. You've got dates of birth, social security numbers, true legal names. There's no going back and cutting up that information. and getting new information issued. I guess legally you could change your name. You could go through the process of changing some of this information, but 143 million people, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get a vast majority of those people to do these things. So the problem with breaches, especially the Equifax breach, is that we don't know the consequences of this. We're going to have to wait 30, sometimes 40 years into the future to find out what will happen with this. Because all this information, as long as you are around and going about your life, you are vulnerable to this if your information was compromised. There's just no way around it. Uber. This is a little bit more of an ethical take. Are people familiar with the Uber breach? Okay. Are people familiar that Uber was breached in the fall of 2016? Because they disclosed in the fall of 2017. What happened with Uber, I call them bad actors. Bad actors compromise all of Uber's information, drivers, customers. If you've ever used an Uber, chances are your information, your credit card information, your identity, not your identity per se, but who you are, your name, is in the hands of these bad actors. The bad actors reached out to Uber, said, hey, we have all this information, all this sensitive, personally identifying information. If you give us money, we won't post it. We won't publish it. Sounds to me like blackmail, but Uber sat down as a board and said, you know what? Let's find out how much money they're asking to not do this. So they went back. What is it going to cost for you not to publish this information? $100,000. I'm sure Uber, a company like Uber, is like, hey, we'll write that check out today, right? $100,000. The bottom line is Uber did that. They paid these guys $100,000. And they didn't disclose to anyone that they had been breached. So for a whole year, if you were a driver, a customer, and your information was compromised, you didn't know it. Fast forward to the fall of 2017. One thing when it comes to blackmail, if you pay off somebody who blackmails you, what are they going to do eventually? They're going to come back for more. So these guys realize, hey, Uber only paid us $100,000. Uber's got tons of money. We were stupid. We should have asked for a lot more. So they go back, hey, Uber, it's us again. Yeah, the $100,000, we've blown through that. We're going to need $2.5 million to not publish this information. Of course, Uber at that point says, well, forget it. We're not paying again. So they go ahead and publish the information. And what I always tell people is it's one thing to be breached. It happens to a lot of organizations. There's no crime in that per se. I shouldn't use the word crime, but people are a little bit more forgiving when it comes to organizations being breached. When you're dishonest about the breach, especially when you're dealing with other people's information, and there's some deceit involved, that's where it becomes a problem. And Uber is feeling that right now. There's litigation. The Attorney General of Pennsylvania filed litigation, not because of the breach, because of the fact that they sat on the fact they were breached for a year. There's also a class action lawsuit in California with respect to all the information which was compromised on behalf of all the people whose information was compromised. So you have the fallout from that. And what I always say is the cover-up is worse than the crime, right? People will forgive a breach. Will people be that forgiving about the fact that you lied about it? And as you can see with the litigation, Uber's finding out the hard way that people generally are not as forgiving when it comes to the fact that this information, that the fact that the breach occurred, they didn't share it with people. With the new GDPR rules, the General Data Protection Act out of the EU, right, that just came into play last month, Uber's on they're on I call it a test run, because there was a movement, even though this occurred when the GDPR was not in place, there was a movement in Britain to not allow Uber to transact there. And there was also some talking within the EU about not allowing Uber to work there as well. But they're going to give Uber basically a second chance to see if they can prove themselves to be a good corporate citizen. Because if this were to happen to Uber again, and they don't disclose under this GDPR, they're going to be facing major, major sanctions. That's one thing that GDPR will come down on, is the fact that if you are breached and don't disclose it, you're in a world of hurt. So, bottom line for this, take security protocols seriously, make your organization a hard target. That's really all you can do. Because I'll get a question, what's the best thing to do to make, to prevent this from happening, what can we do? And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. There's no magic potion. What you can do, though, I always use the bear analogy. If you're out in the woods, and there's a group of you running, and there's the bear chasing, you just don't want to be the slowest person, right? You want to make yourselves to be the hardest target. Because not everybody's going to take security seriously, and they should. But that's human nature. Intrusions. I want to talk about an intrusion case which happened in Blaine, Minnesota. Anybody familiar with Blaine, Minnesota? Okay, it's a suburb, 60, 70,000 people just north of Minneapolis. Last winter, the winter of 2017, they had problems with their water supply. So they put out a press release. There's a power failure blamed for Blaine water woes. Okay, they made it sound as though, yeah, there's a power supply failure here, almost akin to like a blown fuse in your house, right? Your light blows, it's a fuse issue, you go ahead, you just change the fuse, you move on with life. So that's the way the city of Blaine discussed this. Yeah, we've got a power supply issue, but our technicians are working on it, and we're going to have it back up and running in no time. In the meantime, boil your tap water, right? Everyone wants to hear that, right? When you're running water out of the tap, boil it. Yeah, people in Blaine were very thrilled about that. So they put out this press release. They say that the drop in water pressure was caused by an internal power supply failure, and they're looking at the technical aspect. They're consulting with outside technicians, and they're also consulting with outside security experts. Well, that got our attention, because if you have a blown fuse, right? Something just happens to your power supply. I get having a technical person come in and take a look at that. But why are you bringing in a security expert? So that caught our attention. When we found out about that, we made a request of the Blaine Police Department, because we knew Blaine also had opened up an investigation into this blown fuse matter. So we said, look, Blaine PD, we read about the press release, we read about what's going on. Is it possible for us to get a copy of your police report just for our own edification? And at first they were very reluctant to put out this police report. Minnesota, I'm not certain how Nebraska works. Minnesota has a very consumer-friendly, it's called the Minnesota Data Practices Act, where essentially if you ask for a public document, you're going to get it. Very strong sunshine law. So Blaine realized, we're going to have to turn this over at some point. So yeah, we'll send you the police report. Please don't disseminate it. Okay, well, I'm not disseminating it. I'm just going to tell you about it. That's all. And I know that's a wordy slide, and I apologize for that. I hate wordy slides. But essentially what you have here, the first box, Blaine PD opened a police report into this matter. Okay. The detective goes out to the site, where the control site is, and he asked the technicians, can I see the digital video recording of the pumps and of the site itself? Let's start with that. Yeah, the DVR, that had been beeping for a couple of months, and it was kind of annoying us, so we unplugged it. That's the answer the detective got. Okay, strike one, right? Okay, no recordings whatsoever because they just unplugged it. Didn't think they needed it. Okay, what about the logs for the pumps? Can I see those? Because that will go a long way to determine what happened. Yeah, the logs on the pumps, typically after 24 hours, we get rid of those. Okay, so anything past 24 hours, there are no records for with respect to the pumps. That's right. Okay, so you can see where this detective is, right? It's not going well. And it's not going well largely because the security protocols are not taken seriously. They're not taken into account at all. So the next 14 pages of this police report, redacted. As we all know, fancy word for we're not going to show you what's in the report. I worked for the FBI for 22 years. I redacted my share of documents. By the way, I did not work on the Trump or Hillary email situation. Had nothing to do with that. But I did redact a number of documents. Typically, you know, you redact for victim to not disclose victim identification information or national security information. So very familiar, but it is unusual in this type of event to have 14 pages of nothing but redacted written on every page. But that's what was turned over. This was the last page of the police report. Clearly, the detective was looking into, and it's Minnesota State Statute 609.594, damage to property of critical public service facilities, utilities, and pipelines. Okay? When the city of Blaine put out that original press release, this was about a blown fuse. This was about a power supply failure of some type. The detective was looking into criminal mischief into the system. Clearly what happened here is that someone hacked into the Blaine water supply system and shut it down. And what we found out is that although it was publicized in 2017, it had happened before, and there had been no publication about the event. So twice, which makes one wonder what type of security protocols are in place for critical public infrastructure. Because in this event, you know, I'm picking on the city of Blaine. In this event, the city of Blaine did not have any meaningful security protocols in place. We're talking about city water supply. So the takeaway from that is, again, when it comes to security protocols, I mean, critical infrastructure, water, power, you have to have something in place. That's completely unacceptable because somebody got into that system. Ransomware. Is anyone familiar with this slide? Okay, personal experience?
No.
Oh, no, the gentleman behind you.
I spent the better part of the weekend when visiting my mother, clearing it up, or trying to help her manage it.
Yeah.
I visited for 3 days, and 2 days we were trying to clean up other files and make her computer use.
Did she have backups?
No.
Okay, so I'm guessing you got none of the information back.
No.
Yeah.
And she had made one payment, not got anything back, and they were going to do the second.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you for volunteering that, because I think that I give this presentation a lot. I think that this happens to more people that nobody lets on. But this is the WannaCry virus. If this shows up on your computer, essentially, as I'm sure you'll attest, your information is basically locked down. You're not getting at your information any longer. Unless you have great backups in place, the only way you're getting your information back is to make the Bitcoin ransom payments. And in this instance, WannaCry virus, I believe it's 300 Bitcoin if you pay within 3 days, and they'll unlock your information. If you fail to pay within 3 days, it goes up to 600 Bitcoin. You have another 3 days. After 7 days, they figure, hey, you're not going to pay. The information is expunged in your computer, as you indicated. Your information is gone. There's no known cure for this. That's why I was very curious as to how you try to address it. I mean, your efforts seem very noble, but I think it was all in vain from the standpoint of there's no known cure. Yeah, there's no known cure for this virus. And it hits randomly. That's the problem. Make certain your files are backed up. That's really the only way out of this, because once your information is held as it is in this virus, there's really no way out of it other than paying the Bitcoin ransom. There are a lot of people in the United States intelligence community who believe that the government of North Korea is behind this virus, and a lot of times North Korea, at least historically, has used computer viruses and ransomware in order to fund themselves, or at least bring more money into the coffers. It's a poor government from the most standpoint, but they are adept at cyber warfare. Not sure if they're actually responsible for it, but there are a lot of people in the intelligence community who believe that they are. Phishing and spoofing. Anyone have personal familiarity with phishing or spoofing they want to talk about? Okay. Is everyone familiar for the most part, phishing and spoofing? The email scams, right? Okay. Remember in the early 90s It was the prince from Nigeria who would send you the email. He had all that money. All you had to do is provide your bank account number, and you could get a piece of the action. We all snicker about that now because they're so poorly written, and it was thought to be what a fool. Only a fool would answer this. We actually had a case in the Minneapolis division, a gentleman in North Dakota, who ended up losing out close to $1 million in that Nigerian scam. Just an FYI. But what I have on the board here is a copy of a phishing scam. Now, I know it's a little difficult to read, but at the top, it purports to be from Google, dated March 19th, 2016, so just keep that date in mind. I'm going to reveal the recipient of this, but not right at the moment. Someone has your password. That is the subject. Hi, person. Someone just used your password to try to sign into your Google account. And then they list the account. Google essentially saved your bacon. We did not allow the person to sign in because we caught him in time. We intercepted it. The details of this attempt, Saturday, March 19th, they list the IP address. The location of this person was in the Ukraine, and we all know that every person in Ukraine is a computer hacker, right? Right? But there is a lot of cyber activity in Eastern Europe, so it lends some credibility, some credence to this email. Google stopped this sign-in attempt. You should change your password immediately. And they have a change password. All you have to do is click on, put in your new password, and away you go. And it's Google, right? So you know it's safe. This person gets this email, realizes, wow, okay, it looks like I've dodged one. They click on the attachment, put in their new password, and away they go. The problem with this, the reason it's in my presentation, this is a phishing scam. And the recipient of this was a person by the name of John Podesta. People familiar with John Podesta? Arguably, this email phishing scam set off the Hillary Clinton email investigation because the person who got Podesta's password basically downloaded everything he had as far as files and information and sent it right over to WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks, of course, published it all. And people snicker, how could he have done this? How could he have fallen for this? I'm going to go through a couple of other email scams where not just information went out the door, but big money as well. We'll start with Upshur Smith. Any questions on that, by the way? Like I said, I'm trying to move through this fairly quickly, but Upshur Smith, major pharmaceutical company in Plymouth, Minnesota, just outside Minneapolis. A couple of years back, there is a pharmaceutical conference in China. All the major pharmaceutical players are going to be at this conference. And Upshur Smith is no different. The only difference was Upshur Smith on its website publicized this. Our CEO is going to China, going to be a part of this major pharmaceutical conference because we're going to explore new avenues to expand in Asia. That's where all of the action is going to be, so we're going to be there. So they make this big deal. They publicize it. Everyone knows the CEO is going, and sure enough, he goes to China. But a day or two into the conference, the chief financial officer at Upshur Smith, and again, this is a sophisticated company. This isn't, these people know what they're doing by and large. The chief financial officer gets an email purporting to be from the CEO. I'm at the conference in China. Wonderful time, meeting a lot of people. There are a lot of opportunities in Asia. There's one opportunity in particular that I'm very interested in. I don't want you to tell anybody about this opportunity because we're in the very early stages of communication, but what I need you to do, Chief Financial Officer, is I need you to immediately wire $52 million to this account in China in care of my name so that I can move on this opportunity. And again, tell no one within the company about this. It's very sensitive. So the Chief Financial Officer gets this email, believes it to be from the CEO, calls up Fifth Third Bank, the bank that deals with this, they're based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Bank, I need you to wire $52 million to this account in China. I need it to go tonight. Consider it done. and the bank did wire out the money. Fast forward about 6 days later, CEO returns from China, comes back to Upshur Smith. Wonderful meeting. Great opportunities in China and Asia as in Asia as its whole. A lot of room for growth. That's great, boss. Can I talk to you privately about the one opportunity that we emailed back and forth about? You know, the one where you asked me to email 50 or wire $52 million? Of course, the CEO has no idea what the guy's talking about. You wired how much money? You wired it where? The FBI was called, but again, this was a wire transfer that had occurred roughly 6 or 7 days earlier. So we all know the solution to that. The FBI was able to pull back many wire transfers during my time, but after 6 or 7 days, that money was gone. CEO, chief financial officer, they're also gone. You know, I don't know what the coffers are like at Upshur Smith. I'm guessing that a $52 million hit, that's going to be a tough one to take. The footnote to this is that Upshur Smith sued Fifth Third Bank, the bank that wired the $52 million. They sued Fifth Third Bank under the theory of, hey, bank, we know we asked you to wire $52 million to China, but you know, you've got an extensive fraud department. Somebody should have picked up on that and told us that was fraudulent, which, you know, I don't know how that's going to work out for Upshur Smith, because essentially the bank did exactly what they were asked to do. So that's still ongoing, but when somebody loses $52 million, somebody else is getting sued. There's no question about it. The IRS scams. Has anyone fallen prey to this, or at least been contacted by the IRS via email or text message? I know when I was at the FBI, we dealt with this a lot. People would call in. I had a friend personally call in, crying. What's the problem? The IRS just sent me an email. There's a tax lien. I know I don't owe anything. What am I going to do? I said, send me the communication. It's one of these scams. And people were falling for this. Nobody wants to run afoul of the IRS, right? But people were falling prey to this spoofing scam, and they were sending very sensitive information to this email purporting to be from the IRS. And not just people, not just everyday people, HR directors. There's a couple of different iterations of CEOs sending an email to an HR director at a company saying, hey, you know what? The IRS is asking for W-2s, they're asking for social security numbers, dates of birth of all of our employees. I need you to send that over to me right away. Of course, the HR director, much like the chief financial officer at Upshur Smith, they don't want to run afoul of the CEO, so they gather up all of that personally identifying information and shoot it out to the CEO or someone they believe to be the CEO working in concert with the IRS, and it's a scam. The information is gone. This is just another variation of the scam. Kindly send me the individual 2015 W-2s and earnings summary of all W-2 of our company staff for a quick review. You know, it seems pretty innocuous. It seems as though it's something that is not an out-of-line request on behalf of the CEO, because they've got the reasons. They're dealing with the IRS. Let's get that information out. And so a lot of companies, private individuals, are sending this information out, thinking they're trying to comply and do the right thing when actually they're being scammed. Okay. Any questions on any of that? Doxing. Are people familiar? Anyone not familiar with the term doxing? Okay. Doxing, and I've got a number of different sites. Doxing essentially is publishing information about somebody or something, getting as much personally identifying information as you can and putting it online, right? And the slide I had before, if you go to a number of these sites, you can find some very sensitive personally identifying information about each one of us. And it's just a matter of the fact that you're out there in public and you're using services, using credit cards, putting sensitive information in various documentation. People get that information because it's all bought and sold, as we all know, and it ends up on these sites. The problem with that is if you have people who want to misuse this information. There are a number of cases in the Minneapolis area where somebody is convicted of a crime, they're mad at the police, they're mad at the attorney, the prosecutor for prosecuting them, they're mad at the judge. And they'll go out to these sites, buy this information, and put it up on their own website. This is, I've redacted it, but this is information from a local judge. That's their name is blocked out, their age, 60 to 64, their phone number, and their address. This guy went out, took this information, purchased it from one of those sites, put it up on his own website to try to make trouble for this judge. It's happened to sheriffs, it's happened to FBI agents, it's happened to prosecutors. And it's very easy to get. Clarence Thomas, he sits on the U.S. Supreme Court, obviously. There's his address, there's his telephone number, and there's a satellite picture of his house. The chief technology officer of my company, Computer Forensic Services, happens to be friends with Clarence Thomas, so he used this in a presentation, and the judge was very good humored about it. But it shows you, I mean, the redactions are ours. If you know where to look for this stuff, you can find this stuff on anybody. And the judge was, I think his eyes were open, because I don't think he knew that this is so easily accessible. The president, again, the redactions are ours. All of that information is available through these sites. Social security number, date of birth, phone number. I got the president's cell number. Very easy to get. You know, if you can get it on a Supreme Court justice, you can get it on the President of the United States, you can get it on anybody. So the next question invariably comes up, well, how do I get my information out of these sites? There is an opt-out provision on all of these sites. Let me go back to them again. You can go to each and every one of these sites, and I've just put up a few. The issue is it takes an hour to remove your information per site. And once you do that, you have to continuously do that. You have to do that every quarter. So you can do the math on how much time that's going to take you every 3 months. But that's really the only way to go about getting your information off those sites. So if there are people involved in doxing, you've made somebody angry or somebody's out to get you and they want to put up your personally identifying information, your home address, social security number, whatever it is, if they're determined enough, they can put it out there. So.
Is that a statute that sets up the opt-out? I mean, how?
No, it's the question was, is it a statute which allows you to opt out? No, it's not a statute. It's just a protocol that these I guess information companies offer. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people take them up on it. I've been on those sites. It seems like nobody takes them up on it because you can literally find anybody. Yes, ma'am.
Is the information that's collected up until the time you opt out and that goes away, then you do it in the next quarter? Is the previous information that you got is wiped out now part of the new quarter and you have to keep it? Or is it just
Yeah.
for the quarter?
Yeah, the question is, if once you opt out, is there new information or is the old information back? It's essentially all of the information that is personally identifying. If you've opted out, so I want my social security, my name, all that information, I want it off there. They'll take it off. It's all this information is sold. It's sold and purchased. Once it's sold and purchased again, after 3 months, it goes back on. So that's why it's important to keep on top of it. And the reason I pointed out, it's very difficult to stay on top of this. Who's got the time to mess with this, right? But it's available to bad actors to do bad things with it. Like I said, there are a number of cases in and around the Twin Cities where sheriffs, judges, prosecutors, their information is being posted. In some instances, some of these guys are showing up at people's homes. So it's clearly a problem. So when it comes to security protocols, what's the answer to this? as I mentioned earlier, what's the silver bullet? What's the magic potion? Unfortunately, there is none. That's the answer. But there are ways that you can make yourself or your organization harder targets. One is to slow down, which I know is antithetical today because we're all in a hurry to get things done. We're all under time constraints, we're under time pressures, but slow down. And be serious about designing a culture of information security. When I was with the FBI, once a year, whether we needed it or not, we had virtual training where we were mandated to sit down, take a course on information security, maybe a half an hour, sit down, go through all the questions. At the end, there was maybe a 10 or 15 question examination, and we had to sit through and pass that examination. And at the end, voila, we were information security trained and all was well. Every employee had to do that, which I always chuckled at that because to me that was ridiculous. This is not really pounding home the importance of information security. This was checking the box security. This was checking the box to say if there was a problem, if we were breached, or somebody made a faux pas when it came to information security, we could go back to Congress and say, all of our employees had information security training. We checked the box, which is baloney. That's not a way to go about security. The stakes are too high here. I'm not suggesting that you have security training for your organization once a week, once a month, whatever it is, but it has to be ingrained into the culture of what you're doing if you're handling this type of information, because people are out to get it. And if your security protocols are not serious and you are targeted, people are going to get your information. Some of the practical things I suggest: lengthy, sophisticated passwords, two-factor authentication if you can do that. You know, when accessing sensitive databases, one thing the FBI was very good about when it came to very sensitive data, sensitive information, there were two-factor authentications. You couldn't just use a swipe card and get this information. There was a little bit more expected. So these are all steps in the right direction. Never open suspicious emails or emails that you're not expecting with an attachment. It sounds very easy. It sounds very simplistic. You'd be surprised how many people do this. I don't know if it's human nature or what it is. Even after people have been trained not to open attachments, we in the FBI would have that type of training. Then we would do mock phishing scams. And if there were 100 people getting these phishing scams, there's always one or two that would open. Like, you just had the training. How could you do this? So that's one thing you can do as far as, you know, making certain that people truly have an understanding of this training. Redundancy, multi-factor authentication. I've stressed this to title companies in and around the Twin Cities. Do a lot of wire transfers, banks, title companies. Why is one person able to just send out wire transfers? Why, in the Upshur Smith case, was one financial officer able to send out $52 million without any type of checks or balance? To me, that was astonishing. And it happens, a lot of title companies, a lot of banks, there are people that have that authority to do. They just send it out. Why not build in some redundancy into this system where perhaps it takes 2, maybe 3 signatures to send out, you know, money over X amount, money that you're not afraid to lose to a scam, essentially. Very common sense ideas in my view. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Looking at our time here, we're still okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about digital evidence. I don't know how many people have had experience in court or elsewhere with digital evidence, but the nice thing about digital evidence, it's unbiased. It's straightforward, and it's complete if you're doing it correctly. There was a case out of Minneapolis, about 3 or 4 years ago, involving a former Minnesota Timberwolves basketball player, Dante Cunningham. Poor guy had to play for the Minnesota Timberwolves. If that wasn't bad enough, it got worse for Dante. But Dante came up to Minneapolis. He was going to be one of the players that saved the franchise. Didn't work out that well, but he came up with his girlfriend. They lived in a very affluent suburb of Minneapolis. Problem was they didn't get along too well. There were times when the police were called out to break up scuffles, arguments. One night, the police are called out to the home, and the girlfriend has some scratches on her neck. Clearly something more had happened here. And so Dante was arrested for domestic violence. Very serious charge. He's arrested. He's brought down to Hennepin County, which is the county which encompasses Minneapolis. And he's booked on domestic assault. The judge, it's his first offense. The judge is willing to cut him a break as far as not keeping him incarcerated. It's in the middle of winter. The Timberwolves are playing. I don't know what went into the judge's decision, but he tells Mr. Cunningham, as long as you have no contact with your girlfriend, no cards, no letters, no telephone calls, no text messages, you can be out on bond. If there's any violation of that no contact order, you're going to be right back here at Hennepin County. Okay, Dante's, I understand, Your Honor. Just want to go about my life. Okay, fair enough. So the judge, Dante makes bond. The judge cuts him loose. He goes back to practicing with the Timberwolves. It's interesting. He goes out on the floor for a game following his arrest. Fans are booing him. He starts the game every time he touches the ball. This is in his home arena. He's being booed. Finally, the coach takes him out of the game. This isn't working. You got to sit down. Earlier that day, his girlfriend, maybe an hour or so before the game, contacted the police. I want you to come over here, look at my cell phone. He just sent me a text message before he went to the arena telling me if I don't drop charges, he's going to kill me. Police drive out to the house. They grab her phone. She shows them the message. Yeah, it's from Dante Cunningham's Skype account. Pretty plain and simple to the police on the scene. They contact the Minneapolis police. Yeah, we're going to have to arrest Dante Cunningham. Felony violation of a no contact order. Is he still at the arena? Yeah, it's halftime. It was halftime when they went in. So the Medina police, the suburb where they lived, meet up with the Minneapolis police. They go down into the locker room at halftime. They see Dante. Mr. Cunningham, you're under arrest. He's looking at him all incredulous. Turns around. They handcuff him in front of his teammates, his coaches, and they frog march him out of the arena. So now he's back down at Hennepin County, vehemently saying, I never reached out for her. I didn't contact her in any way. Very vehement about that. So Computer Forensic Services, we're the digital crime lab for the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. We get the case. We get Dante's, so he has a couple of cell phones. We get those cell phones. What was interesting about it is Dante, I don't know how you are with your old messages. Get rid of it if it's done. Dante kept everything. He had messages on there from years ago. It's like, does this guy ever clean out his phone, right? Well, apparently he does not. So we're going through all of these messages. We're looking for the recent message, the one that he just sent. Oddly enough, that one's not there. Well, that's kind of strange because, like I said, this guy keeps messages from years back. Okay, we tell the police, hey, on the two devices that you've given us, we can't find the message at issue. Can you go back to the house, get a search warrant, get all of the electronic devices from within that house so we can look at them? Fair enough, that's what we'll do. They go back to the house. It turns out to be like 25 devices, all kinds of things. So we start doing our analysis, starting to look through all these devices. We did tell the police, oh, by the way, grab the girlfriend's devices as well. Got to have everything. So we eventually start looking at her devices. Her iPhone right there, it's the message is there from Dante. If you don't drop this, I'm going to kill you. So we start digging deeper into her device. And we look at Dante's Skype account. And we see that on the night in question, or the afternoon in question, that she goes into Dante's Skype account. She knows his password, types out the message, sends it to her phone. Now, I'm hoping that eventually somebody would have looked at that, but I'm not certain because the police, when they went to the scene, they looked at it, it seemed pretty cut and dry. we see that it's irrefutable that she sent this message to herself through his Skype account. So we bring this to the police, like, hey, you know, we're not vouching for what kind of guy Dante is, but when it comes to this violation of a no contact, this felony situation he's looking at, got grave doubts about this. We can show that it was sent by her to herself through his Skype account. Of course, the police are like, oh yeah, this is awful. We got to get him out of jail. The county attorney, eventually he was let out, but the county attorney did not drop those charges until about 3 months afterward. And when they dropped the charges, basically they said that it was due to a lack of evidence, which, very interesting way to put things. Again, I'm not commenting on what kind of a boyfriend he was, but when it came to that violation, alleged violation of the no contact order, that was not him. She later confessed to the police that, yeah, I did this. She had a boyfriend in Arizona, and her goal, some of the other text messages that she had to this boyfriend in Arizona, by the time we're done with him, he won't have anything. They were out to take Dante's money and his freedom and live together in Arizona, fat, dumb, and happy on his money. But for digital forensics, there's a good chance that Mr. Cunningham would be in prison right now. A very good chance. Of course, the information gets out about Dante. The Timberwolves cut him. They don't want any part of this guy. No NBA team would even consider signing this guy. Finally, Computer Forensic Services is contacted by one organization. They're like, hey, we understand you did some work on the Dante Cunningham matter. Can we talk to you about your findings? We tell them about what we found. And shortly thereafter, the New Orleans Pelicans signed him to a deal. So he's, as far as I know, last time I checked, he was down in New Orleans. And the story, if you Google this guy, you'll still see, you know, he's a domestic assault. You know, that was the original charge. I'm not certain if the no contact order, I haven't done it for a while, but you'll probably make reference to his violation of the no contact order and the charges were dropped. Well, that's the reason charges were dropped, because he didn't do it. A very bad situation for Mr. Cunningham that could have been much worse. Any questions on that? Yes.
Did the girlfriend get charged with anything? Because that's like a big
Yeah.
thing of public resources.
Excellent question, and a very necessary question. The question was, did the girlfriend get charged with anything, essentially a false police report? No, she was not. The police wanted her charged. The county attorney said no, didn't want to dissuade other people coming forward when it came to domestic violence. Despite the fact that, you know, this was obviously false information, which was made to really jam this guy up. So no is the answer. Dark web, I want to talk about one case. I think people are familiar with the dark web by and large. I know we're getting short on time, but just want to squeeze this in. Darknet, its origins in the 1970s, the Navy. The Navy, they're doing communications. It was called ARPANET back then. They wanted to cloak all their communications so that the Russians, etc., wouldn't hear what's going on. So that's the origin of the darknet. It now became commercially available, if you will, and available for all kinds of untoward purposes. One played out this spring in actually suburban Minneapolis, or suburban St. Paul, rather. This guy's name is Stephen Allwine. He was an elder in his church, married, father of one. He didn't want to be married anymore. He was into the dark web. He would go on sites, Ashley Madison. During one presentation, I call it Dolly Madison. People start laughing. Like, oh yeah, Ashley Madison. So I won't get that wrong again. So he would go and set up dates on Ashley Madison, go out with women, and realized, hey, you know what? This is kind of fun going on dates. I don't want to be married anymore. So rather than divorce his wife, he decides, yeah, the church, it's going to look bad if I divorce her. So I'm going to have her killed, essentially, because obviously that's a better solution. So he goes online to a site called Beza Mafia, which is a site allegedly run by Albanian crime figures, former Albanian military figures. I would show you the site, but they took the site down on the dark web. But essentially the site was a bunch of explosions, a bunch of people getting beat up. And this guy, it's like, these are the guys to do the job. So he reaches out for Beza Mafia on this online site. And they're like, yeah, for $10,000 in Bitcoin, we'll take care of this problem. We have operatives all over the United States. We can take care of this for you. So he sends $10,000 worth of Bitcoin to this Beza Mafia site. He tells the people on this site, who he believes to be our trained killers, yeah, my wife's going to a dog show in Chicago this weekend. That's probably going to be the best time to carry it out. Chicago's a violent city. The Beza Mafia guys are like, yeah, we've got operatives in Chicago. We'll take care of this. So he's like, great. His wife leaves for Chicago. Dog shows on Saturday. He's thinking anytime now he's going to get the call. Of course, his wife comes home on Sunday night. He's perplexed. He just paid $10,000 worth of Bitcoin to have his wife taken out. He gets back on the site. Hey, what's the deal? She's still alive. Oh yeah, sorry about that. That was the B team in Chicago. With another $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, we'll send the A team. Sorry about that. So he does. He sends another $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. Of course, that's a scam. The bottom line is he ends up killing her himself, making it look like a suicide. And that's what he argues in court. He argues that this was a suicide. He had nothing to do with it. We have his computer. We start looking around. What about Beza Mafia? I've never been on the dark web. I don't even know what the dark web is. Beza Mafia, who's that? Through computer forensic services, forensic examination. Oh, his online was Dog Day God. I don't know what that means, but that was him. So we go through his computer. We actually show where, he says my screen refreshed and gave me the wrong Bitcoin address where I sent the other funds. Are you able to match them up? And he gives the site. He's communicating with Beza Mafia. When he said he's never been on the dark web, doesn't know anything about it, never heard of this site, we were able to definitively show he was lying about that, and that he actually did try to contract with Beza Mafia to have his wife killed. Right over there on the left, notice created on Stephen Allwine's iPhone at 9:53:04 a.m. 23 seconds later, the unique Bitcoin is posted on the Beza Mafia website. He sent the money. Then the note is deleted roughly a minute later, or actually 40 seconds. That was posted. So he had no answer for that. He boxed himself into a corner by saying, I've never, dark web, what's that? I certainly don't know anything about the Beza Mafia website. We were able to definitively show when he was on, when he made the payment, and when he deleted it. There was that coupled with the physical evidence involved in the case. Jury wasn't out very long. This guy was convicted of murdering his wife. But forensics played a big role in bringing him to justice. So that is essentially my presentation. I think probably a minute or two if anyone has any questions. Okay. Well, thank you all for your attention.